Now on to our next speaker. I'd like to introduce Laurie from NPM.
Wait, I don't need this.
Oh, you don't need this. Oh, yeah. Nice.
Hello, everybody. I think this works. Oh, only if I hold it right up there. Is this going to work? Da, da, da. I thought I was so clever with the wireless mic, but no, it doesn't work.
Interesting. Sorry. Yeah, that's what I say. Maybe. How about now?
How is that? Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Because I need the thing to hold the slides that I finished writing like 10 minutes ago. So hi, everybody. I'm Laurie. I have been a web developer for 23 years. That's the primary thing that I identify as. But I am also the co-founder of NPM and currently its chief data officer. Because when you're a co-founder of a company, you get to make up a title that has the word chief in it. And I decided that data officer sounded cool. But what I do is I run the numbers at NPM. I analyze what's going on in this mountain of data that we have. But before I get into my talk, the very first order of business is a crowd selfie, because did it even happen if it's not on Instagram? Excellent. Thank you very much. How many of you have heard of NPM? Show of hands. How many of you use it every day? How many of you knew that NPM was a company before this evening? That's better than we usually do. It's usually about half. I'm here to talk about WebAssembly and NPM. Like, obviously, what else would I be talking about? But I'm going to be talking about why NPM is so very, very interested in WebAssembly and the current state of WebAssembly adoption in NPM. And among NPM users, and also a quick tour of some notable or interesting WASM packages that we have found that are already in NPM. But first, an important disclaimer is that I have no idea what I'm talking about. I came to this meetup last month because I don't really know very much about WebAssembly, and I figured that it would be a good idea to show up and learn about WebAssembly. And then as soon as people started talking, it was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, I have stats. I have relevant stats to share with you. So that is why I was like, no, I need to talk next month and give you some stats. But this isn't going to be a super long talk, and I'm also probably going to make some kind of boneheaded mistake because I don't know very much about WebAssembly, and you're all going to go, ugh. So apologies in advance for that. So first, some context. JavaScript is ridiculously popular. That will not be news to anybody in this room, but even for people who are like, yeah, JavaScript's super popular, they don't understand quite how popular we're talking about. JavaScript is the biggest language in the world by basically every metric that we can come up with, and has been for about 5 years now. And people are only just beginning to get that into their heads. They're like, yes, but Java. No, we've been bigger than Java for quite some time. And NPM is also big. We are, as of today, 913,000 packages big. And they are downloaded over 10 billion times per week. So at peak times, there's like 70,000 packages per second being delivered by Cloudflare as it happens. And the reason I mention these things is not because I like big numbers, although I do. It's because it's relevant to how I think WebAssembly and NPM are going to come together. In 2013, a guy called Leo Myrovich did a study about programming language adoption that asked, why do people use a programming language? They could pick any programming language. Why did they pick the one that they used? Is it because they like the features of that language? Is it because they like the performance of that language? Is it because they like the tooling or the debugging? And the answer was the availability of open source libraries. That was the biggest factor. People pick a language if there are open source libraries available in that language that do the thing that they need to get done that day. And that's relevant because NPM is the largest repository of open source software in the world, which means that there's nearly always a library that does the thing that you need to get done that day in NPM. I like saying that it's, the biggest package manager in the history of the world, because like package management's been going on for 30 years, but it's still a true statement that it's also, the biggest package manager in all of history. The existence of 900,000 packages in NPM has created this sort of gravity well that is constantly attracting new developers. They're like, at 99% of the stuff that I need is already in NPM. I just need to write one more package. Now I've written all of it. Great. And they stay inside NPM. Not just for web development, but also for servers and mobile apps and desktop apps and IoT devices. People are using NPM for everything and using JavaScript for everything. And it's super weird because when it started, I was using this for form validation and did not think that this is where it was going to go. And part of the reason that this all happened is because for the last 20 years, if you wanted to write any interactivity into a web page at all, you had to learn JavaScript. For all of its flaws, and it has many, many flaws, JavaScript is the only language of the web, and the web is the most popular application platform that there's ever been. And as a result, 11 million people have learned to program in JavaScript, which is a gigantic user base. And that brings us to WebAssembly. WebAssembly creates the potential to write web apps in any language, because you can write any language, compile it down, put it on a web page, and you're done. You can do that today. Somebody showed me a rich web app that they'd written in Rust with no JavaScript whatsoever. Although it's actually less efficient than JavaScript right now. Like, that's not the interesting part, but you can do it if you want to. And that performance advantage is going to be erased as the WebAssembly people continue to move along their roadmap. So when that happens, what happens? The answer, I think, is probably that people are going to stop using JavaScript, or at least stop using JavaScript as much as they do today. They're not immediately going to stop, right? There's not going to be like a revolution and everyone's going to be like, bring the pitchforks and storm NPM's offices. JavaScript has huge momentum and 11 million users. Those people aren't all going to switch tomorrow. And they're never going to entirely switch away, right? Like, JavaScript usage isn't going to fall to zero, but there's a lot of people today who are using JavaScript reluctantly. They're using JavaScript because they have to, because they need to write a goddamn web page, and it's the only thing that they can use, and they would prefer to be writing some other language, and WebAssembly is going to let them do that, and so they probably are going to do that. It's already like that. Today, 26% of people who use NPM are not writing JavaScript, they're writing TypeScript some or all of the time, which was a huge surprise to us, and they have to jump through goddamn hoops of fire to get TypeScript working. So imagine what they're going to do when it becomes actually easy. So what I'm expecting is that the web is going to become polyglot as a result of WebAssembly. People will pick the programming language that suits their application or their company or their preferences best, and they will use that. But that kind of conflicts with what I just said, right? Because I said that libraries are the #1 thing that influences your choice of a programming language. So if the libraries are the #1 thing, and NPM is the biggest source of libraries, how does that shake out? This is the part that has me the most excited, which is WebAssembly means that you can write modules in any language and use modules from any other language and have them all interoperate seamlessly within the context of WebAssembly. And if you can do that, where would you put these new, magical interoperable modules from any other language but into the already biggest pool of existing modules? If your modules can interact with any other modules, why would you put them into any other pool than the biggest one? If you could take all the best libraries from every language and put them all in one place, it would create a giant registry of really high-quality software. And this is important. It wouldn't be that much bigger than NPM already is. If you took all the other modules from all of the other package managers all together and dumped them into NPM, NPM would be twice as big, but only twice as big. We've already built the scaling capability to be twice as big, so we could do it. And you probably wouldn't do it, right? You probably wouldn't take every single goddamn string operation from every other package manager and put them into NPM because we have those. You would take the best libraries from other languages and put them into NPM. This would massively increase the quality of the software, the quality of the tools that you could use to put together your application, because it wouldn't matter what language it started in. It would all just end up in this same pool. So we're very, very excited about that idea. It has the potential to make software better by blowing up the barriers between modules, between programming languages. There's a lot of work to be done first before that can happen. Obviously, this is not a thing that can start tomorrow, but this is a really interesting direction that the web could go. So because of that, NPM wants to be the very best place for WebAssembly. We want to make the experience great, and that is why I started showing up to this meetup. I want to learn from you where the pain points are, where the problems are, and what we can do to help. Here is one way that we can help, and it is called Tink. And in defiance of all logic, I'm going to try and do a live demo. This is adding a WASM file to a TypeScript, to TypeScript code, and then executing it using Tink directly, and you get the answer. What just happened is, this is Tink. Tink is a new package manager / runtime combination. You don't have to NPM install anything. You don't have to set up a preprocessor. You don't have to install TypeScript. You don't have to install WASM support. You don't have to do anything. You can just use WASM and write TypeScript and run it using Tink, and it works. If there were any packages that needed to be downloaded, those got downloaded, and you didn't have to think about it, and you don't need to know where they are or what they're doing. It's just a seamless way to use TypeScript and WASM together. Tink is still experimental, but you can try it right today. You can just run npx tink. If you've got npm installed, you've got this program called npx, and one of the things that it will do is it lets you install Tink. It's not like using WASM in Node was like super difficult before, like you could do it before, but this makes it, completely simple and easy. So that's where we're hoping to go. That's the sort of future that we see for WebAssembly, this gigantic pool of modules that everyone can use, all of the languages, singing in harmony and dancing in kumbaya. But where are we at right now? What is the actual state of WebAssembly inside the NPM registry today? I went digging into the registry because I am the data guy, and that is what I do. Exactly how much WASM is in the registry? Not a great deal. Not tons. 0.06%. That's not blowing anyone's mind. But remember, it's 0.06% of 900,000, so it's still like 500 modules, right? Like it's a fair number. And the other big piece of data that I have is about WebAssembly and NPM comes from our annual user survey. We do this survey every year. Last year, we got 33,000 people to respond. They tell us about what they're doing and what they're using and why and stuff like that. Like actual human responses, not just me like looking at registry logs and trying to guess what people are doing. And the first question we asked is, have you heard of WebAssembly? 78% of people had heard of WebAssembly, which is good going. 3% claim to be using it already, which is quite something, because 11 million NPM users and 3% means there's 300,000 people who claim to already be using WebAssembly. What are they doing exactly? But using is a pretty loose term, so they could be trying stuff out, or they could be like experimenting with it, like, I don't know. But the big number here is 54%. 54%, that's 5 million people are watching WASM and considering using it. This is a sign that WebAssembly is about to get really, really big. This is the kind of number that React was showing a couple of years ago, just before React became the only way that we write web pages anymore. This means that you are sitting on, you are just at the crest of a breaking wave in terms of the popularity of this technology. So WASM is about to be very, very big, but why are all of these people interested? Well, we asked them. But before I shall tell you what they said, I want to see what you think they said. So here are some of the options that we gave them in random order, and I'm going to ask for a show of hands. So raise your hand if you think it was option A, that it was going to be faster than JavaScript. Option B was that you would be able to import existing libraries. Option C is non-performance benefits like debugging and types. Option D is that they just prefer languages that aren't JavaScript. And E is something else. OK. They weren't really in random order. The number one reason is that they were faster. That's what people think WebAssembly is going to get to them. They think it's going to get them code that is faster than the code that they are currently writing in JavaScript, which is funny, because the people who write V8 and a lot of the other people involved in WebAssembly think that that is not one of the benefits of WebAssembly. They do not think that that is the thing that we should be selling it on. 47% say that it's to import existing libraries, which is the thing that I'm very excited about. 35% say it's about non-performance things. 17% say that it is just because they hate JavaScript, which is what most of you thought it was. But that's interesting, isn't it? Because 65% of people think it's this thing that we don't really think it is, or at least the people who write WebAssembly don't think it is. So the question this raises is, are we mis-selling WebAssembly to the community? Are we giving people the wrong idea about what WebAssembly is for? Or are they right? Is WebAssembly primarily going to be about making stuff faster? And I'm confused about what's going on. So in a total departure from normal speaking practice, I am going to invite your well-actuallys. I am begging you for your not a question, more of a comments. I want you to tell me what you think we should be telling people about WebAssembly. Because NPM has 11 million people that we can tell. So if we can figure out what it is we're supposed to be telling people, then we're going to do it. But we're going to save it until the Q&A. Because I'm nearly done already. So we're going to do all of that in the Q&A. So I said there are 500 WASM packages already in NPM. Which is a fair number, like in absolute terms. Like that's a surprising amount of WASM that people have already written. What the hell are they all doing? Like there's these 300,000 people who say they're using WebAssembly, so what are they using it for? I didn't have time to do a full survey of every single one of the 500 packages. So here I'm really going out on a limb in terms of my not really knowing what I'm doing thing. Because there's definitely going to be some stuff that is popular that I just haven't heard out and have left out of this list, or I'm going to be listing something that people are like, nobody ever actually uses that. No, we discarded that because it was broken. But again, I'm inviting your well-actuallys. Tell me where I'm wrong about this so that I can be smarter about this when I tell the next group of people about WebAssembly. So first and most obviously, there is WebAssembly.js, an NPM organization with tons of packages, including the entire WebAssembly toolchain. It gets 6 million downloads a week, so clearly this is what those 300,000 people who say that they are using WebAssembly are using it for. And maybe they weren't entirely fibbing about the fact that they are doing something with WebAssembly, because 6 million downloads a week, that's some actual usage. Next up is Walt, which is, I don't think tons of people are using this, but it's an experimental typed subset of JavaScript that you can just write directly into WASM without having to cross-compile it. Is anybody in the room using this? Has anybody heard of Walt? Another obvious one is WASMPack, which is a toolchain to compile Rust into WASM. The most interesting thing about WASMPack from my perspective is that the toolchain integrates into itself the ability to NPM publish those things directly into the registry. Obviously, NPM would like to see more tools like WASMPack for other languages. We would definitely like it if every language had one of these. Another big and popular thing is BinaryN.js. BinaryN is a C++ compiler and toolchain for WebAssembly. And BinaryN.js is a port of it to pure JavaScript. There are several WebAssembly compilers already written in it, including Asterius, which is for Haskell, and AssemblyScript and Mscripton. And speaking of both of those things, AssemblyScript. AssemblyScript compiles TypeScript into WASM. And as far as I can tell, it is fairly popular. Most of the WASM packages that I looked at appeared to originally have been written in TypeScript and cross-compiled down into WASM because they sort of conveniently left their source code in the package. I could figure that out. And then there's Mscripton, which, as far as I know, predates WebAssembly, I think. It was used to compile LLVM to Vanilla.js. It was like a project to do that first. And then ASM.js came out, and they were like, cool, we can compile to that, and it'll be super fast. And then WASM came out, and they're using that thing that I just mentioned that compiles stuff to WASM, to compile their ASM to WASM. Does everybody know what WASM is? Did that make any sense at all? And the result of that is that you can take all of these languages and you can run them as WASM today. One of these languages is made up. Who can spot the fake language in this list? No, Pony is a real language. I was very surprised. Nope, graphical G is also real. Muppet. Muppet is the fake language. And you were all like, that's obviously a real language. Everybody loves Muppets. Anyway, but all of this stuff that I've listed so far, this is toolchain stuff. This is stuff to build WASM. It's not actually WASM. What about actual working WASM? Are people writing real code and using it? And the answer looks like yes. This is a semi-random sampling of the 500 packages, the ones that looked interesting given the amount of time that I had. So if you've got ones, especially popular ones that you're aware of that are not in this list, please include those in the well actually section. I definitely want to hear about them. One I was very excited to find about is image magic. Image magic for an old schooler like me is like, oh, it's mother's milk. I love that package. You can do all sorts of cool stuff with images, and it's on a server. It's wonderful. And the pain in the ass thing is that you always have to compile it, and the compiler never works. And it uses this thing from like 4 million years ago because image magic is old. But now you don't. Now you can just use it as a WASM package directly in Node, and you can run it in the goddamn browser, which is amazing. Getting a surprising number of downloads is this thing called Onigasm, possibly just because it has a weird name. It is a WASM port of the Onigorama regex library. Onigorama is a very popular regex library, but there is already an Onigorama node package, which is much faster than this one because it hooks directly into V8. So I'm not sure why you would use this one. You know, the README says this is not faster, don't use it, but people are using it anyway. There's this thing called tdlib WASM, which despite the brilliant name, seems to be a working Telegram client, you know, Telegram, the instant messenger, written in WASM. Although the README is kind of weird, and I'm not positive that that's really what it's doing. It might just be the database part. Please, somebody tell me. Stockfish.js is a chess-playing engine that was originally written in C and compiled to WASM. This is the kind of thing that I was kind of expecting to find, like really hard, complicated C that nobody wants to port to JavaScript, and now they don't have to. So they're just like, yay, it's on the web, and now I can write my chess-playing robot in a web page. Also in that category is Argon 2, which is a password hashing algorithm. Apparently it's a very good one, won prizes and stuff. And they didn't have to re-implement it in JavaScript because they could just write the C and port it straight in. Sax WASM is another straight-up port. It's a parser for XML, HTML, and JSX. It is super fast because that is what Sax parsers are like. I do not know why you would put a Sax parser into a browser. Because it's a browser, it's definitely already got a parser in there, but I guess it's useful on the server. And then there's WASM Brotli, which is a compression algorithm, and this is another port of that. And finally, on the fun side is WASM Boy, which is a Game Boy emulator that has been ported straight out of the C and into WASM. So now you can emulate Game Boy games in your browser, and there's definitely going to be a lot more of that. So this is kind of the pattern that I was hoping to find, and maybe I've sort of, self-reinforcingly found that pattern, which is complicated libraries from other languages that nobody wanted to write all of this pain-in-the-ass JavaScript to get done, and they've now just been able to bring it over and put it into NPM and use it where they always wanted to use it. These are easy ports of difficult code. So if you, in the audience, are an early adopter and you're like, how can I get involved? What could I do that would be actually useful to this community? This suggests a course of action. One of the things that you can do is go looking for your favorite library from some other language that would be super useful if it were on the web, and see if you can hack up a port of that language, of that library. That would be a good way to test out your toolchain and a good way to just, get that library. So to recap, JavaScript is big because NPM is big. People are choosing JavaScript because of all the libraries. WebAssembly might kill JavaScript, or at least make it way less popular, by allowing people to write for the web in any language that they want. Either way, NPM will survive because 913,000 modules is just too useful. Nobody is going to rewrite the whole world if they can just interoperate with the existing world. WebAssembly's interoperability with JavaScript makes NPM the natural home for WebAssembly. We can bring all of the world's best code to the web using WASM, and get it all from one place in NPM. This future isn't guaranteed. This is me making guesses based on data and hunches and experience. This is just one of the ways that things could go. But I think it's very, very exciting, and NPM is extremely eager to help. So thank you very much. And can we have any questions?
Hi, I really enjoyed your presentation. I was curious if you could comment on how you measure package, or how do you determine if a package is using WASM, or do you look in the package JSON, or are you scraping the bundle? What are you doing?
I'm literally unzipping every single package in the entire registry and looking for files that end in .wasm, which is why I had to do a sample instead of the entire registry, because the entire registry is enormous. But yes, I was looking for like actual, are there WASM files in this package, and are they being used for anything?
So you mentioned earlier that NPM was one of the best package managers out there, by whatever metric you want, because of the huge variety of open source packages that you see on there. With WebAssembly, there's the potential for there to be a lot of closed source packages up on NPM, but are still available or grabbable. How do you see NPM playing a role in that? What do you see yourselves doing to keep the community more open sourcey?
That is a really interesting question. So there's open source and there's open source, right? There's anyone can download and use this package, which is as open a source as most people care about, right? Like 90% of developers are like, as long as I can download the thing, I don't actually need to read the source code because I'm too busy. I think probably the existing social dynamics of the NPM registry and of open source in general will probably take care of that. Packages that are not truly open source don't really go anywhere. People have already been trying this, right? People have been trying to publish obfuscated JavaScript to the registry since forever, and it doesn't go anywhere because they're like, this looks shady. Like, I'm not going to use this. So probably that's going to be how that takes care of itself. Open source has a pretty good immune system to closed source right now. And I think that mechanism will probably not be affected by the fact that you can publish a binary. Other questions? Nobody has any well actuallys? Okay.
Oh, why don't you just provide a service to do it automatically as libraries get uploaded?
A service to do what?
To produce the WASM.
Huh, why don't we compile the WASM from?
Why don't you provide it to library provider?
I mean, you can't compile JavaScript just straight to WASM, as far as I understand. Please correct me. So, and 99% of the registry is still JavaScript, so we could do it, but not very much would happen. Like I don't feel like the compilation is the complicated part. The complicated part is going to be persuading people to do all of this. So we could, but I don't feel like it's the critical part. Yes. Person who definitely doesn't work here. One is my mouse cursor, and one is the mouse cursor of the person who's running the Google Hangout. Any other questions? All right, I'm serious about if you find interesting WASM packages on the registry, just DM them to me. I really need to know more about this stuff. Thank you all so very much for your attention.